Hello you fantastic people and welcome back to Borderlands 3. Hope you guys are all doing well. In this video I've got a super exciting one for you guys today. It is my level 65 Mayhem 10 FL4K Peregrine Rack Attack class mod build. I don't know if I pronounced the class mod right, but it's the new DLC for class mod. This thing is really weird and really awesome at the same time. I'll start off by showing some clips on screen so you guys can see this build in action. By the way, the clips won't have any DLC for bosses in them, so there's no spoilers or anything like that. Of course, the build itself will have DLC items in the inventory, and of course the class mod is literally the centerpiece of the build, but there'll be no boss spoilers in there, just in case you guys haven't finished it quite yet. But this build, like I said, so much fun to use. It is a primarily mobbing based build and just absolutely wrecks with rack attack. It does really good with bossing as well, but is centered primarily for mobbing. Essentially, you take the class mod, which if you guys haven't acquired it yet or haven't seen it before, it essentially, whenever rack hits an enemy, it drops a grenade. Whatever grenade you have equipped is the grenade it drops. And if you guys have used rack attack before, you can get multiple racks shot at once. It's kind of ridiculous how many grenades this thing drops. And if you find the right grenade, which by the way, it's not a particular god roll, you can find multiple different grenades that work really, really well with this build. Any grenade works with it. It's just if you want to do crazy amounts of damage like you're seeing on screen, you want to get the strongest ones you can find, which is still actually quite a variety of grenades. And all of the ones that I'm going to showcase in this build are still acquirable, and most of them are pretty easy to acquire as well. But yeah, in this video I'm going to show you guys, of course, the class mod, the weapons, the gear that you guys need for this build, as well as a skill tree, a loadout to make this thing work as much as possible, get the most damage out of it, also making sure that FL4K is a survivable boy as well when running through the melee one takedown, mobbing situations, bossing situations, all that good stuff. Like all my builds, you don't require god roll items for this one to work. Of course, if you have really good items, like I do have quite a few in my inventory because I've been farming like crazy, it is going to do a ton of damage like you're seeing on screen, but you don't need god rolls for this thing to work, to be viable in Mayhem 10, to be able to do the takedown, all that good stuff. So don't stress about if I have a few crazy items in there. It's not dependent on all those things. But yeah, hopefully the clips did this build justice on screen. This thing does a ton of damage and it's so much fun to use. It's a really good team, kind of just having a really tanky rack attack as well as Ped doing a ton of damage now, and FL4K of course always doing a ton of damage whilst being pretty damn survivable in this build as well, thanks to some of rack attack abilities. But yeah, let's get into the gear you guys want. As for anointments to start off with, 100% ASE is pretty much your go-to for rack attack because you can constantly spam that thing on repeat and it's constantly going to have that up, which is a really good ability for rack attack. Next to mags, elemental damage is also a really good one for the exact same reason. Consecutive hits on a high fire rate multi-pellet weapons like shotguns or Lacho Monarch is really, really good as well. Stacks up really quick and you get a ton of damage. Those are probably the only ones I'd recommend for this build and the way we've got it set up today. As for weapons, the top ones, my favorite ones at the moment to rock with this build is the Light Show. Of course, does a ton of damage, super fast fire rate, super high damage, and you can run around with it and be really agile with FL4K, which is great for survivability. The Hellwalker, best shotgun in the game right now. It does a ton of damage. It's so much fun. I've already covered that a ton on the channel because it's just a ton of fun, so I'm sure you guys already know that one already. The Convergence is a new DLC for shotgun. This thing is a close second best shotgun in this game, and I really want to get some better rolls with it to show it off properly, but this one is so far the best one I have, and it does really well against bosses as well. Of course, the Monarch is a staple, has been pretty much since it came out, is really good for bossing. If you guys are lacking on damage anywhere else in the weapons, and you just want to get bosses done efficiently, with the Monarch out, it's going to take them down really, really quick. As for the backpack, the inventory, I just left all the good ones I have in here for the PC save file. That's going to be in the description, by the way. As for all my builds, it's always linked down there. But there's a whole bunch of different options you can use. Of course, I've got the Light Shows. The Hell Shock is really good still. The Maggie is really good. The Kaiozen, not a great roll, but I showed this on my Alpha FL4K build last night. This thing, I just got it whilst farming for the clips, and it's not a great roll. It's not elemental, and it does a ton of damage for some reason. So go find yourselves a better Kaiozen, and it's going to do absolutely ridiculous amounts of damage. I have a Unforgiven if you guys would like to hold it in your hand. The grenade ability is going to do 432% extra critical hit damage, and I got extremely lucky, and I'm never getting rid of this Unforgiven because it has 100% AC on it as well. So that does a ridiculous amount of damage and just cheeses everything. If you just want to use rack attack and not shoot anything, just hold an Unforgiven in your hands essentially. Kib's Worth, I got one of those doing the takedown today, works really well. The Starved Beast, get yourself a good roll and it's going to do tons of damage. Even non-anointed versions of this gun do tons of damage. The Chaos, really good AR in this game. Laser point accuracy and does just ridiculous amounts of damage. Even if you're not using the right elements, it just shreds through enemies. It's crazy. I've got a few extra conversions in here for you guys for the save file. And the Monocle, of course, is a great sniper rifle in the game now. Even though it used to be meme, it's fantastic. Now, as for shield, this thing, there are a ton of different options, but if you want the most survivable build, particularly depending on what grenade you're using, I'm currently rocking, or the best option that I think is in the game for this build is the Lightspeed grenade. It comes out of the Guardian takedown and it's really hard to acquire, so don't stress, there's other options as well. It's not dependent on this, it's just if you want the strongest grenade, the Lightspeed is the one to go for. Now I know the Fish Slap is also a really good build or grenade for this build, but that's switching up to a melee build, and I didn't want to do that for this build because it's not an obtainable item anymore. So I've got it actually in the backpack for you guys if you want to mess around with it for PC save file users, but I'm not centering it around, I'm not showing it off or anything like that for this build because one, I don't really like melee builds, and two, I don't want to make a build for something that's not obtainable anymore. Other options other than the Lightspeed is pretty much any hard-hitting purple grenade that you can get. I've got all of these in the last 2 days just farming vending machines whilst I'm farming other bosses. Just check those vending machines every time that you are running into the boss fight. If you guys can get anything that does a ton of nerves or splits into different grenades, that's going to do crazy extra damage. Look out for the highest hitting one and you're just going to absolutely annihilate enemies. Now the reason I have the stopgap on with Shield Breaker feel annoying, essentially we're going to spam that immunity phase with Rakk Attack. Whenever you hit your Rakk Attack ability, you're going to be immune for 5 seconds. If you spam it twice in 5 seconds, it's not going to add extra time. You have to wait for it to finish the immunity stage, then hit Rakk Attack again. You'll be able to see on screen there's a little like kind of border around that shows that you have the shield up or the immunity phase up. Once that goes down, hit it again. You'll get used to it pretty quickly, and essentially makes Flak immortal or immune to just any damage. It's kind of ridiculous, which is really needed, not because the enemies are doing a ton of damage, because this grenade and a lot of these purple grenades are extremely dangerous if you're mobbing situations. So it's really good if you get a stray grenade bounce off or homing grenade hit you on the way through. It's going to pretty much one dink you, so having that immunity stage saves your life and stops you from going down every once in a while just from random grenades flying through the sky. Now, if you guys are going to use a less chaotic grenade, unlike the Lightspeed or purple tracker grenades, something that's more centered around hitting one particular enemy rather than blowing up the entire room, you're going to have a different few options for shields. I would highly recommend checking out the new Ultra Shield from DLC 4. This thing is pretty awesome. At the start, I didn't really understand why the capacity was so low. It doesn't say it on the card, but it actually doubles your health, which makes it really, really survivable as well. It does come up with about 23 top capacity if you can get some bonus on there. But the best part about it is you have a 25% chance to absorb bullets, which is great, but also increase action skill cooldown rate by 30% for several seconds. Getting Rakk Attack on a loop as quickly as possible is really, really good for survivability, doing a ton of damage, and having a ton of fun just spamming that grenade ability from the racks and just destroying all mobbing situations. So trying to get action skill cooldown rate into the build as much as possible is going to be really helped out from this shield. As you guys can see on the left as well, we have somewhat of a Frozen Heart variant of it as well. Being able to have Novas, it doesn't have to be a Cryo Nova, by the way. You can get any elemental type Nova on this shield. With that anoint, it's pretty much spamming a Cryo Nova, Fire Nova, Corrosive Nova, whatever you want, whilst also having that cooldown ability and the bullet absorb. Plus you can get other things like 80% melee damage while shield is depleted. So many great bonuses you can shove into one shield, which makes it a really good choice. Other than that, of course, the Transformer, really easy one to obtain and really good for survivability. If you chuck on Pool Party, run on those electric puddles and it'll just charge it for you. An Old God, I always keep this on me. It's only level 60 because its capacity is actually higher than most level 65 ones I find at the moment, unfortunately. So until I get a God roll, I'm gonna just keep this in here. It's just for bossing situations, for when I don't need the capacity anyway. It's just giving me an extra 20% fire damage, which is really, really helpful. Like I said, the Frozen Heart I also use in this build generally. I'm going to keep that one until the next build I make for just the general Rakk Attack build, because I think there are better options for this one particular, especially with that survivability and trying to get Rakk Attack going as quickly as possible. Now, as for the good stuff, the new class mod, I don't have any god rolls for this thing yet because it is really hard to obtain. It drops from Benedict, by the way, the boss in DLC 4. I'm not going to show it or anything like that just to avoid spoilers, but the guy's name is Benedict. You guys guys can farm him. This thing drops, I think, is a 5% dedicated drop rate, and I'm not sure. Please let me know if you guys have seen it in the world drop system. I personally haven't yet, but this thing is really, really cool and has the ability to be absolutely amazing. I don't have any god rolls, like I said, and you saw the clips at the start. We're doing a ton of damage. It could make it ridiculous. If you get 5 points in a planetary stalker, like you can see the skill points up the top here, I only have 1 in the one I'm rocking, but that is a really, really strong kill skill. If you get 5 in there, you're going to be doing a ton of damage. It's kind of ridiculous. This one here, I forget its name, but it's an action skill cooldown rate, so a good secondary one is that one. This one here is essentially critical hit damage if enemies are far away. Keep an eye out for good passives. This one is the best one I've managed to obtain so far. Grenade damage, really good for the ability itself because the racks drop grenades. That's going to increase its damage. SMG and assault rifle, it was just something all around that I could try and use different weapons for. I'm going to keep these ones in here for the backpack for the save file if you guys are interested. A few different situations, a few different weapon variants you guys can use in this build with those class mods. As for artifact, I'm still rocking the Pearl. This thing is easily the strongest artifact in the game and just does a ton of extra damage. If you guys have any suggestions for any base game artifacts or just any artifact in the game that you think would work really well in this build, please let me know in the comment section down below. I'd love to hear it. As for Mayhem Modifiers, I would recommend close to what this is. I couldn't quite get exactly what I wanted because it took so long to re-roll, but I would definitely recommend having more than okay boomer. Of course, grenade damage up by 25% is of course going to really help that rack attack ability. Healy Avenger I pretty much recommend all the time. It's a really neutral one. It's really easy to avoid. I kill any enemy before it has a chance to get the regen off it anyways. As for the hard modifier, I wouldn't recommend Chain Gang. I just couldn't get rid of it, honestly. I'd recommend Drone Ranger instead. Same reason for the Healy Avenger. Nothing really has the chance to heal by the time Flak's already killed it, so it's no stress there. For the very hard modifier, I wouldn't use Holy Crit for this build because you are going to sacrifice a lot of your damage when you're using that grenade ability. I don't like having Buddy System, but I think it's probably one of the better options. That or Post-Mortem if you can deal with those creepy skulls trying to chase after you and down you. Now into the good stuff, the skill tree for this build. Start in red tree, of course, equip Rack Attack, and then go down to Flock and Load as well as Rack Accelerate. Getting extra charge and extra cooldown rate, really, really good. And then you send forward 2 additional rack per spam. So every rack that hits an enemy drops a grenade. So as many racks as you can get going at once is going to drop a ton of grenades, and it's really good for clearing rooms. Those 2 are amazing to use. As for skill tree points, I started off with as many points as you get into Interplanetary Stalker, Class Mod, and you spending points itself. Because as you can see, with 6 points, 16% increased damage per stack, stacks up to 3 times. You can imagine how much extra damage you're going to get if you can get all 5 points in your class mod in a planetary stalker. Could be actually ridiculous. Of course, pet damage is also buffed, and you get a bunch of different bonuses against a robot bonus, human bonus, and for some reason this won't go down, but there's other bonuses down there. I also put 5 points into Hunter's Eye. Really good having those extra bonuses against those individual enemies. It's not as great of an ability when you're not using Bounty Hunter because you're not getting those bonuses against bosses. If you want to in bossing situations, you can switch to a Bounty Hunter. There will be a slight increase in damage because you're getting your kill skills whilst fighting bosses, but you don't actually need to. The class mod itself does pretty good against them as well. And of course, 3 points in head count. You want to get your action skill back as quickly as possible. You want to be using your rack spam and that cool grenade ability in conjunction with your weapons as well, because the grenades aren't going to hit as many critical hits as you are, so the action skill cooldown is going to be slower if you're just depending on that rack attack spam. So try and use your weapons as well to try and get the rack attack back as quickly as possible. Then I actually decided to put all 5 points into Ambush Predator plus the 3 in this particular class mod because it gets you a ton of critical hit damage. 32% extra crit damage is heaps. Using a rack attack ability, especially when you have so many racks, those grenades are, particularly if you're using a light speed, are homing and will find enemies ages away from you. You're going to get a ton of extra damage with that and have a much higher chance of one-shotting them with those individual tracker grenades. I then also put 3 points into Leave No Trace. I almost didn't, but I couldn't not include the Hellwalk. It's just too good. So I ended up putting 3 points in there pretty much just for that shotgun. I then put 2 points in Second Intention for the reload speed. I hate being in mobbing situations, being stuck reloading. So I put a couple points in there to help that situation out. Moving down, we put 3 points in Most Dangerous Game. This is one of Flak's best kill skills. Of course, gun damage, crit damage, handling, pet damage for a really, really long time. 2 minutes for just killing one badass or boss, which in the melee one takedown happens all the time. Put 3 points into big game, then moving down a very cheap 15% critical hit damage for 1 point. And then because we're using so much rack attack, we want to put 5 points into Grim Harvest. An extra 50% action skill damage is going to really help try and one-shot all of those enemies, particularly in the melee one takedown. Gun damage is also increased, and pet damage is also increased, really making that a solid team with Rakks, Flak, and Pet. Then moving down to the best capstone in this game, being a Megavore, 20% chance to hit criticals anywhere on enemies' bodies. For Blue Tree, we actually decided to not go in here at all. I originally spec'd green and red tree and then had 9 points left, which just wasn't enough for me to make it into Frenzy properly. I was only going to have 4 points here. I wasn't going to have heat bites, and I didn't think it was worth doing. So I just maxed out having those extra quality of life, or making it easier to do different things by speccing more into green and red tree rather than getting a few extra points into Frenzy, particularly seeing as we're doing a rack attack build and we're not really benefiting that much from Persistent Hunter because of that. As for green tree though, this one is fully decked out. 5 points into Furious Attack gets you extra damage just for shooting things, which is great. 5 points into Overclocked, increased fire rate means more damage per second. I put 5 points, Eager to Impress. That's the name of that perk. Essentially getting action skill back as quickly as possible as a kill skill. At 6 points total, because we've got an extra one from our class mod. You get 1.5 seconds off your action skill cooldown just for killing one enemy, which is really good. 3 points into Turn Tail and Run, health regen, and damage reduction while moving. Gun damage, fire rate while standing still. So if you're doing bossing situations, or even as much as you can in mobbing situations, stand still for extra damage. I put a point into Lick the Wounds all the time. Flak just goes down from so much random stuff. Random barrels, rocket launchers that scale to Mayhem 10, or just random elemental dots that you have no idea where they came from. So Pet is really good to help you up if there's no enemies to get yourself a second wind on. Then to get down, I actually ended up putting 4 points into Self-Repairing System. I didn't originally have that much in there, but seeing as I didn't go Blue Tree this time, I decided to put an extra couple points in. Gives you a ton of extra health and health regen, which is really helpful. That got us down to the Fast and the Furious, an extra 25% gun damage whilst above half health, which is pretty regular, particularly with that extra health regen and the ability, if you're using the stopgap, you're rarely going into that health bar as well, which is really helpful. Also the pet damage, movement speed, also great things. That gets us down to the green tree capstone, the Power Inside, which again is really good for rack attack because it's for action skill and or action skill start technically, but action skill and start is the same thing for rack attack. Get an extra 25% extra damage for 15 seconds. You're spamming rack attack pretty much every 5 to maximum 10 seconds. So you're gonna have Power Inside all the time. And if you're using the immunity stage stopgap, you're very rarely going into the health. So your health should be full majority of the time, unless something's going pretty chaotic. That way you're going to get double that damage, 50% extra damage pretty much all the time, which is a really crazy capstone ability for rack attack. As for pet choice, I use the Spider Ant Scorcher all the time for this build. Generally, for my other builds, I switch to the Jabba for bossing situations to stack Frenzy, but seeing as we're not using that at the moment, I always keep Spider Ant Scorcher on for this build. 10% extra elemental damage, and then the health regen is also super helpful. But yeah, that is pretty much everything I have for our new level 65 Mayhem 10 Flak rack attack build using the Peregrine mod, if I said that correctly. This thing is so much fun to use. I really hope you guys did enjoy the video, found it helpful. If you did, feel free to smash subscribe down below. I'd really appreciate it. If you guys want to hit that bell, YouTube will notify you for whenever I post a video. There's a ton more builds on the way. We've got Gamma Burst coming up next. We also have a standard rack attack build, which doesn't require DLC. We've got a URAD build. We've got a ton of different things in the works, as well as other Borderlands 3 videos as well. That would be awesome if you want to smash subscribe. If you guys want to help me out even more, you can smash like and share the video. If you guys have any recommendations for this build, other builds, let me know in the comment section down below. I'd love to hear it. If you guys want to check us out over on Twitch, that is a link down below, or just search CodeMQ on Twitch. We usually hang out, make these builds, find cool buff, new weapons, the metas, etc. Hang out with chat and have a good time. And yeah, other than that, I hope you guys have a fantastic day. I shall see you guys in the next video and a live stream. Till then, adios.